The bitter January wind off the Hudson sliced through my thin wool coat as I pushed through the revolving doors of Bellissimo. It was 5:10 p.m., 10 minutes late. My fingers were numb, my nose undoubtedly red, and the blowout I'd carefully styled that morning, hoping to squeeze an extra day out of it, now hung in limp, damp strands around my face. Bellissimo was not merely an upscale Italian restaurant. It was an institution in Midtown Manhattan, a place where deals were brokered over Barolo and the lighting was designed to make politicians look honest and mistresses look legitimate. Sophia, where have you been? Marco, the floor manager, materialized the moment I stepped into the kitchen. Usually, Marco was a picture of Roman composure, a man who could handle a grease fire or a health inspector, with a dismissive wave of his hand. Tonight, his eyes were wide, the pupils dilated with genuine panic. The subway stalled at 42nd, I said, breathless, already untying my scarf. I'm sorry, Marco. I'll make up the time. Forget the time, he hissed, grabbing my arm and steering me toward the lockers. Table 7, the VIP room. You're serving them tonight. I froze, my hands fumbling with the knot of my black apron. What? No, that's Jessica's section. She handles the high rollers. I've only been here 3 months. Jessica called out. Food poisoning, or so she claims, Marco said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Listen to me, Sophia. These aren't tourists. These aren't Wall Street boys celebrating a bonus. These are, associates of Mr. Ricci. The name landed like a heavy stone in the bustling kitchen. Dante Ricci, the owner. The ghost. In 3 months, I had never seen him. He was a specter, a signature on the paychecks, a name whispered by the bussers with a mixture of reverence and terror. Rumors circulated that he was merely a recluse venture capitalist. Others suggested his portfolio included assets that didn't appear on any tax return. The private room in the back, Marco continued, smoothing the shoulders of my uniform. Remember the protocol. You are professional, you are efficient, you are invisible. Do you understand? Invisible, I repeated. It had become my mantra since fleeing Boston 6 months ago. I had left behind a degree in international relations, a promising career path, and a life that had slowly suffocated under the grip of a controlling ex-boyfriend. Now I was Sophia the waitress, quiet, diligent, a ghost in her own life. I took a stabilizing breath, checked my reflection in the stainless steel prep table, and pushed through the swinging doors. The private dining room was an architectural marvel of acoustic isolation. As the heavy mahogany door clicked shut behind me, the ambient noise of the main dining room vanished. The air here was cooler, scented with expensive leather and the woody aroma of aged scotch. 6 men sat around the circular table. They wore suits that cost more than my annual rent in Queens, fabrics that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. As I approached, conversation ceased abruptly. 6 pairs of eyes turned to me, assessing, weighing. But only one gaze mattered. He sat at the position of power, facing the door. He was younger than I expected for a man of such rumored influence. Perhaps mid-30s, he possessed a predator's stillness. His hair was dark, swept back with precision, revealing a face composed of sharp angles and shadowed planes. He didn't look like a restaurant owner. He looked like a monarch in exile. Good evening, gentlemen, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. I'm Sophia. I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you with something from the bar? I moved around the table clockwise, taking orders efficiently. Gin and tonic, Pellegrino, a specific vintage of Amarone. When I reached the head of the table, Dante Ricci didn't speak immediately. He studied me, his dark eyes tracking the tremor I fought to suppress in my writing hand. You're new, he said. His voice was a rich baritone, carrying a faint, unplaceable accent, transatlantic perhaps, with the ghost of Italy beneath it. 3 months, sir. And yet you handle the silence better than most, he observed Scotch neat. Balvenie 50 year, if we have the bottle opened. We do, sir. I turned to leave, and the door opened. A man in a dark suit, security, clearly stepped in, leaned down, and whispered into Ricci's ear. Ricci's expression didn't shift, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He gave a microscopic nod. The guard retreated. I hurried to the bar, my hands shaking as I placed the order. The bartender, an older man named Leo, gave me a sympathetic look as he poured the 50-year-old scotch with reverent care. Careful in there, kid, he muttered. The air gets thin around him. When I returned to the room, the dynamic had shifted. Papers were spread across the linen tablecloth. blueprints, or perhaps shipping manifests. The joviality was gone. As I placed the crystal glass in front of Ricci, a vibration buzzed against my hip. My phone. I froze. Staff policies strictly prohibited phones on the floor, but my grandmother, Nona, was in hospice care in Tuscany, and the doctors had warned me that the end was a matter of days. I had kept the phone on silent, tucked in my apron, a lifeline I prayed wouldn't ring. I stepped back into the shadows near the service station. I checked the screen. International call, Florence. My heart hammered against my ribs. I glanced at the table. They were engrossed in a heated debate about customs thresholds. In Livorno, I took a step toward the door, intending to slip out, but the heavy wood was closed. To open it would draw attention. I turned my back to the table, hunched over, and answered in a breath of a whisper. Pronto, Signorina Russo. It was the night nurse, her voice tinny and apologetic. Mi dispiace disturbarti. She spoke rapidly in Italian, explaining that Nona had taken a turn. Her breathing was shallow. She was asking for me. The grief hit me like a physical blow, a wave of nausea and despair. I closed my eyes, my hand gripping the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. Dileche arrivo, I whispered back, my voice cracking. Dileche la amo, per favor. Tienta la mano per mi. Tell her I'm coming. Tell her I love her. Please, hold her hand for me. I ended the call. I needed to leave. I needed a flight to Italy I couldn't afford. I wiped a tear from my cheek with the heel of my hand and turned around. Silence. Absolute suffocating silence. Every man at the table was looking at me. They had stopped talking. Dante Ricci was leaning back in his chair, his glass of scotch untouched, his gaze boring into me with a newfound, terrifying intensity. I had spoken Italian, native, fluent, emotional Italian. I apologize, gentlemen, I stammered, sliding the phone into my pocket. It was a family emergency. It won't happen again. Shall I bring the appetizers? Ricci didn't blink. You're Florentine. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir, originally. He held my gaze for a second longer, dissecting me. Then he picked up his glass. Bring the appetizers. The rest of the service was a blur of misery. I performed the motions, pouring wine, clearing plates, crumbing the table, but my mind was 4,000 miles away in a sterile room in Florence. When the dinner finally ended near midnight, Ricci paid with a black titanium card. He didn't check the total. As I handed him the receipt for a signature, he paused. Buonanotte, Sofia, he said. His Italian was flawless, educated, devoid of the American affectations most second-generation immigrants had. Buonanotte, Signor Ricci, I replied softly. I fled to the locker room the moment they left. I stripped off my apron, counting the cash tips. It was a lot. Ricci had left 50%, but it wasn't enough for a last-minute flight to Europe, not with my rent due. I sat on the bench, head in my hands, and let the first sob escape. Sophia. I jumped. Marco stood in the doorway. He looked pale. Mr. Ricci wants to see you in the office. My stomach dropped. Am I fired? Marco, I know I took the call, but just go now. The office was located behind the kitchen, a space I had never entered. It was surprisingly elegant. Dark walnut paneling, a Persian rug, and the smell of expensive tobacco. Ricci sat behind a massive desk. Standing by the door was the security guard from earlier, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. Sit, Ricci commanded. He didn't look up from the file he was reading. I sat. The chair was leather, uncomfortable only because I was trembling. Ricci closed the file. You have a degree in international business from Boston University. You speak English, Italian, and French fluently. You have a clean criminal record, though you filed a restraining order against a Mr. Thomas Grady 6 months ago. The blood drained from my face. How do you have that? I vet everyone who enters this room, Sophia, even the staff. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It wasn't a termination notice. It was a flight itinerary. First class, New York JFK to Florence Peritola, departing tomorrow at 10 a.m. I don't understand, I whispered. My translator for a negotiation in Milan has fallen ill, Ricci said, his tone clinical. I require someone who speaks the dialect, someone who understands the cultural nuances of Tuscany, and someone who is discreet. You need to get to Florence. I need a translator. He opened a drawer and placed a thick envelope on the desk. $5,000. Advance payment. The flight is yours regardless of whether you take the job, but if you work for me for 2 weeks, this cash is yours. I stared at the envelope. It was freedom, it was Nona, but it was also a deal with a man who ran background checks on waitresses and held clandestine meetings in back rooms. Why me? I asked, finding my spine. You could hire a professional agency. Agencies leave paper trails. They ask questions about the nature of the business. Ricci leaned forward, the lamplight catching the hard line of his jaw. You are desperate, Sophia. You are running from a past in Boston, and you are terrified of losing your future in Florence. People in your position tend to be loyal because they have no other choice. He was cruel, but he was honest. Is it illegal? I asked. It is complex, he replied. But you will not be asked to commit any crimes. You will translate, you will attend dinners, you will wear the clothes I provide, and when the 2 weeks are over, you will be free to go. And my grandmother said, you will have ample time to visit her. My driver will take you. I looked at the ticket. I looked at the cash. I thought of Nona alone in the dark. I'll be ready at 8 o'clock, I said. The transition from Queens to Dante Ricci's world was violent in its speed. A black Escalade collected me the next morning. My suitcase, battered and cheap, looked ridiculous in the trunk. At the airport, we bypassed the terminal entirely, driving directly onto the tarmac where a Gulfstream G650 waited, its engines whining a high-pitched song of unlimited capital. Ricci was already on board, typing on a laptop. He barely acknowledged me as I boarded, simply gesturing to the seat across from him. We work while we fly, he said. Here are the files on the Bianchis. Review them. For 8 hours, I wasn't a waitress. I was an analyst. I read through profiles of a Florentine shipping family, the Bianchis, who controlled crucial docks in Livorno. I spotted discrepancies in their reported earnings versus their shipping volume. When I pointed this out to Ricci over the Atlantic, he finally looked at me with something other than dismissal. Sharp, he murmured. Good. We landed in Florence as the sun was setting, painting the Arno River in shades of bruised purple and gold. A car whisked us not to a hotel, but to a villa in the hills of Fiesole. It was a fortress of stone and cypress trees, ancient and imposing. Go see your grandmother, Ricci said as we stepped into the marble foyer. The driver will take you. Be back by 8 p.m. We have dinner with the Bianchis. The visit to the hospice was a blur of heartbreak. Nona was frail, her skin like parchment, but she was lucid. She held my hand, asking no questions about how I had afforded the trip, simply grateful I was there. I promised to return the next day, guilt gnawing at me as I left her to return to Ricci. Back at the villa, I found a garment bag hanging in my room. Inside was a dress of midnight blue silk, modest in cut but devastating in fit. Beside it, a velvet box containing pearl earrings. I dressed, staring at the stranger in the mirror. Sophia the waitress was gone. In her place was a woman who looked like she belonged in a palazzo. The dinner took place in a private dining room at the Enoteca Pinchiori. Dante introduced me simply as his associate. The Bianchi brothers, Aldo and Franco, were older men with shark-like smiles and eyes that lingered too long on my neckline. The negotiations started cordially but quickly turned technical. They spoke in rapid-fire Italian, using idioms and local slang, assuming Dante, who they knew was American-born, would miss the nuance. He's overextending, Aldo muttered to Franco in a thick Florentine dialect while smiling at Dante. The American thinks he can buy the port access without the union leverage. We'll bleed him dry on the tariffs. I leaned over to Dante, pretending to admire the wine list. They aren't worried about the price, I whispered in English. They control the union. They plan to strike the moment you sign, freezing your assets in customs until you pay double in consulting fees. Dante's face remained impassive, but his hand found mine under the table. His grip was warm, firm, a silent acknowledgement. He put down his wine glass. Gentlemen, Dante said, switching to English, let us discuss the union contracts. Specifically, the clause regarding strike prevention guarantees. I will require a personal indemnity bond from both of you against any labor stoppages for 24 months. The Bianchi brothers froze. The color drained from Aldo's face. They looked at me, then at Dante. They knew the game had changed. By dessert, Dante had the deal he wanted. In the car ride back to the villa, the atmosphere was electric. Dante loosened his tie, the first sign of fatigue I'd seen. You saved me €3 million tonight, he said. looking out the window at the passing vineyards. You knew they were corrupt, I said. I knew they were greedy. I didn't know the mechanism. You gave me the mechanism. He turned to look at me. The interior light of the car cast his face in shadow. You are dangerous, Sophia. I like it. I'm just a translator. No, he said softly, you are not. The week progressed in a strange duality. By day, I sat by Nona's bedside, watching her life slowly ebb away. By night, I stood beside Dante Ricci in ballrooms and boardrooms, dissecting his enemies and charming his allies. I learned that Dante wasn't just a businessman. He was a broker of power. He moved goods that didn't exist on manifests. He silenced problems before they became police reports. It terrified me, and yet there was a seduction to it. The competence, the absolute control. And there was him. We were in the library of his villa on the fourth night. We were reviewing contracts for a meeting in Milan. The fire was dying in the hearth. My grandmother knew your father, I said suddenly. Dante stopped writing. He looked up slowly. Excuse me? Today, she was lucid. I mentioned your name. She said she knew an Antonio Ricci in the 80s. She said he was a hard man, but fair. Dante stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the darkness. My father was a soldier. Not in the army, but in this life. He died when I was 10. She said he helped her once, when my parents died. Dante turned. Your parents died in a car accident in 1998. It was arranged. A debt collection gone wrong. My father found out too late to stop it, but he ensured your grandmother had the money to raise you. He paid off the mortgage on her house anonymously. The air left my lungs. You knew who I was before I walked into that office in New York. I knew the name, Dante admitted. When I saw Russo on the payroll, I investigated. I felt an obligation to check on the granddaughter of the woman my father tried to protect. So this is charity. I felt a flash of anger. The job, the ticket, it's just guilt money. Dante crossed the room in 3 long strides. He stopped inches from me. I could smell the scotch and sandalwood on him. The ticket was guilt, he said, his voice rough. The job was necessity, but bringing you here, keeping you here. He reached out, his fingers grazing my cheekbone. His touch burned. That has nothing to do with the past. You are the only real thing in my life, Sophia. Everyone else is a vampire or a victim. You see me. He kissed me then. It wasn't gentle. It was a claiming. It was the release of a week's worth of tension, of adrenaline, of shared secrets. I kissed him back, my hands twisting into his shirt, forgetting the danger, forgetting the logic, forgetting that he was a monster and I was his employee. The reality check came 2 days later in the form of Elio Ferrero. We were at a gallery opening in Milan. Ferrero was a rival, a younger, more volatile crime boss who had been encroaching on Dante's territories. He approached us near a sculpture of twisted steel. Ricci, Ferrero smiled, his teeth too white, and the famous Sophia, the translator. Elio, Dante said, his body shifting subtly to shield me. You've been making waves, Cara. Ferrero said to me, ignoring Dante. The Bianchi brothers are very unhappy. They say you are the reason they lost their leverage. I just translate the words, I said, keeping my voice steady. Words have consequences. Ferrero stepped closer, invading my personal space. Dante, you should be careful. Pretty things break so easily in our world. The threat was blatant. Dante didn't verbalize a response. He simply stared at Ferrero with a look so cold, so utterly devoid of humanity, that Ferrero actually took a step back. Touch her, Dante said, his voice a quiet rumble, and I will burn everything you own to ash, starting with your house while you are sleeping inside it. We left immediately. In the car, Dante was on the phone, barking orders in rapid-fire Neapolitan dialect. Codes, kill orders, mobilization. I sat in the corner, shivering. We are leaving, Dante said, ending the call tonight. What? My grandmother. I have arranged a medical transport, private ambulance to the airport, a medical jet to Switzerland. I have a property in the Alps. It is secure. Ferrero is making a move. Florence is no longer safe. You can't just move a dying woman. I can and I will, because the alternative is Ferrero using her to get to me. Or to you. He grabbed my shoulders. Sophia, listen to me. You are in the game now. You are a target. I am getting you out. The Swiss chateau was a gilded cage, nestled high in the Alps, accessible only by a private funicular or helicopter. It was beautiful and isolating. Nona arrived 6 hours after us. The journey had weakened her. The Swiss doctors Dante hired, the best in Europe, made her comfortable, but they told me the truth. It was the end. I sat by her bed for 2 days. Dante never left the property, but he gave me space. He commanded his war from the study, destroying Ferreira's network piece by piece, while I held Nona's hand and whispered goodbyes. She died at dawn on a Tuesday. The silence in the room was absolute. I walked out of the room, numb, and found Dante waiting in the hallway. He didn't say a word. He just opened his arms, and I fell into them. I wept until I was empty, ruining his silk shirt, shaking apart. He held me together. We buried her in a small cemetery in the village below the chateau. It was just us and the priest. That night, the snow was falling heavily, blanketing the world in white silence. I stood on the balcony, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, watching the flakes descend. Dante stepped out beside me. "Ferrero is finished," he said quietly. "The police raided his warehouses this morning. He is in custody. He won't survive the week inside." "And the Bianchi brothers?" "Retired, permanently." He turned to face me. "You are safe, Sophia. The threat is gone." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. It looked identical to the one in New York. "This is your payment, plus a bonus, and a ticket back to New York. The flight leaves Zurich tomorrow at noon." I looked at the envelope. I looked at him. "You're sending me away. I am giving you a choice, a real choice this time." His eyes were dark, unreadable, but I saw the tension in his jaw. "You can go back. You can pay off your debts, finish your master's degree, meet a nice man who works in an office and doesn't have armed guards at his wedding. You can have a life, Sophia, a safe life. And if you stay," he hesitated, "if you stay, you are mine, and I am yours. But there is no going back. My world is dark, Sophia. It is blood and money and constant vigilance. I will give you everything, wealth, power, protection, but I cannot give you peace. I cannot give you safety." I looked out at the mountains. I thought of my apartment in Queens, the bitter wind, the loneliness, the feeling of being small, of being a victim of circumstances. Then I looked at Dante. I thought of the negotiation with the Bianchis, the rush of power I felt when I realized I was the smartest person in the room. I thought of the way Dante looked at me, not just with desire, but with respect, with recognition. He was a monster, but he was my monster. I took the envelope from his hand. Dante flinched, a microscopic crack in his armor. He thought I was taking it. I walked to the railing of the balcony and held the envelope over the edge. I opened my fingers. The wind caught the money and the ticket. $100 bills swirled away into the snowstorm, dancing like white leaves into the abyss. I turned back to him. "I don't want to be safe," I said. "I want to be with you." Dante let out a breath, a ragged sound. He pulled me to him, his grip bruising, desperate. "Are you sure?" he whispered against my lips. "Sophia, are you sure?" "Teach me," I said. "Teach me how to run the empire." 2 years later, the wind off the Hudson was still bitter, but I couldn't feel it inside the warm, plush interior of the Bentley. We pulled up to the curb of Bellissimo. It looked the same, though the awning was new. Marco was standing outside, shivering, checking his watch. The driver opened my door. I stepped out. I was wearing a coat of white mink, and on my finger, a diamond the size of a quail's egg glittered in the street lights. Dante stepped out from the other side. He adjusted his cufflinks, then offered me his arm. We walked into the restaurant. The conversation didn't stop, but it quieted. Heads turned, eyes widened. I saw the new hostess, young, terrified, holding a stack of menus, stare at me with awe. Marco rushed forward. "Mr. Ricci. Mistress Ricci, your table is ready. The private room." "Thank you, Marco," I said. He froze. He recognized the voice. He looked at me, really looked at me, and saw the ghost of the waitress who used to be late for her shifts. His jaw dropped. "Sophia," he whispered. I smiled. It was a sharp smile, a Ricci smile. "It's Signora Ricci now, Marco," I said softly. "And bring us the Balvenie. 50-year." I took Dante's arm, and we walked into the back room, leaving the door open just enough for them to wonder, but never enough for them to know.